I'm going to look at MANS and I'm going to look at the National Broadband. So let me just deal with MANS, because way back in 2008, the Controller and Auditor General did a report back in 2008, and you're familiar with that probably, and he talked about the slow uptake, and he pointed out certain things in relation to what he discovered, whoever the Controller was at that time. I just forgotten. Thank you. So you were on notice that there were certain issues in relation to MANS. Now, so I want an update really in relation to the uptake of MANS. And if you don't have it, I'd like it in writing. And then in relation to the actual report that we got, and it's all about accountability. I'm not here to ask about fibre or dark fibre. Okay. I'm here to ask about value for money and the processes. So that's what I'm just going to stick with in relation to this. So when we had a meeting, it was at the 14th of February, that we suddenly got this Mason's report handed to us. Isn't that right? Yeah. And that was March 18. Yeah. So why wasn't it published quickly in March 18 and not in February 19? That's the first question. For openness and accountability. Yeah. And on that there was a certain cynicism because prices were reduced significantly and this was published. Now why wasn't that published immediately given the seriousness of the complaints made and what this report said? Just a simple answer to that. Why wasn't it published? Did the fault lie with G or with the government, with the minister? Who did it lie with?
Yeah, so I think in fairness the fault lies with us, Deputy. Okay. And I just very briefly, because again I'm conscious of time constraints. What we tried to do when we got the Analysis Mason report... I know you
engaged and it took longer.
I tried to come up with answers.
I know, listen to me. I looked at it, you engaged and you acknowledged that the engagement took longer. How could it take almost a year before you published it? And then it's just published on the day that the independent providers...
In retrospect, it would have been far preferable if we had published the report when we got it.
Absolutely.
As civil servants, the sort of... The instinct is we have a report, what can we do to fix it, how can we respond to recommendations, but it would have been preferable. Okay, just my limited experience on this, it makes sense to publish. Yeah.
Information is empowerment and people can make up their own minds, and now we're filled with cynicism on the date that they came in, the independent providers, this is suddenly produced, we're left scrambling around trying to read it. I've read it since. More importantly now, what about the implementation of that? Where are we at? If you don't have it, if there's still ongoing, send it to us.
Okay, so we have, and the BT letter is helpful in some respects. We haven't seen it, but we've implemented, or rather ENET and the Department have implemented 11 of the 13 recommendations.
11 of the 13 have been implemented. Very good. Yeah.
And 2 further to be done around improved communications with external stakeholders. And then there's a chunk of work that we asked Comreg to do.
That's what I was coming to, because you gave us a very helpful updated letter on the 13th of March, and it was the Minister requested Comreg and the 4 bullet points set out.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that? When will the Comreg complete this?
So I understand that, let me just give you an exact, it says Q3 2019, but I have a note which kind of describes in a little bit more detail in terms of what specifically they're doing.
Will you come back with that as well and tell us when these are just the practical questions.
Yeah, that's fine. So just in terms of the detail, they've asked consultants to do the work. They'll start on the 1st of May, field work in May and June, draft report in July, final report in August, September, and then we'll publish it.
And you publish it.
And we won't publish it in the way we published the last one. It'll be a little bit more expedient. Okay. Now, let me go back to MANS in 16, where you do an internal review. Is there any other internal review going on? Because I was just a bit mixed up. I saw an internal review complemented by Norcontel, is it? So is that... Yeah, no, just listen, because is there any other internal review other than that one in 16 complemented by Norcontel? Leading to the decision? Yeah. No.
So there's no other internal review that we should be aware. Okay, so when we go back to that internal review, and you said it was limited to whether to extend or tender, was that it?
So it was limited to, should we sell the MANS? should we
tender or should you renew?
Should we stick with the concession type arrangement? And then the status quo, which was
the status quo was going to come to an end. Yeah, so it was going to come to an end. Surely the decision was: are we going to extend? Are we going to go to tender? Are we going to stop it?
So we wanted so effectively that.
That's fine. Yeah, and you came up with a report that was Norcantel.
Yes.
Was it? Now, at that point, there were issues raised by people in relation to the MANs and in relation to transparency. I'm not saying, I'm telling you that we were told there were issues. Did it not occur to the department at that stage to look at the bigger issues? So, given what was raised in this report that was only published this year, it was on your desk since 18, and there were issues raised prior. Why didn't you include in the review all those other issues?
I suppose there's a bit of perspective required around this. You have 70 service operators that are using the MANs.
Yes.
We had one formal complaint from BT that was supplemented, I think probably through the work of the Mobile Phone and Broadband Task Force, by 2 additional complaints which were not articulated in a great deal of detail by Westnet, I believe, and by a company called iMedia. So that, to us, didn't represent a fundamental concern. That. So when you look at the kind of relative,
I understand the context of that. Within your own processes, would it not have been clear to you what subsequently emerged in the Mason report? Mason, it is, yeah. And they're raising serious issues. They mention a number of options, which I'll go back to, and they recommend one. But they talk about transparency, they talk about lack of transparency with prices, lack of openness, and they make very specific recommendations. So were they not all obvious to you back in 16 when you...
maybe just to deal in a couple of ways.
Yeah.
So we have regular reviews with ENET around a range of performance indicators.
That's right. You have an obligation under the contract of the service agreement, and every quarter you have to get reports.
When we consulted back in 14 or 15 on the review, and we canvassed a number of the users of the MANs, the view coming back was the MANs was operating effectively, it was performing well, so by extension you could conclude from that the concessionaire themselves were doing a good job in the MANs. They met all their annual investment obligations to extend the MANs, they were meeting all their KPIs. We had 3 complaints, as I said, out of a pool of 70 service operators. But in our decision to extend, we flagged at that stage our intention to undertake a detailed review, which we had commissioned Analysis Mason to do, to look at pricing issues. Now, I think it's very important when you're looking at the Analysis Mason report to look very closely at what it is saying.
I did, and I've read it now. I've only a few minutes, and I've read it.
There's one key sentence, I think, which sets the context for the report very well. And that is on page 2. It says, the analysis presented in this report shows a range of areas in which ENET should improve its adherence to the code of practice. So it's talking about improvement. Now, I know of no organisation, no government department, no entity that doesn't have scope
just a minute, just a minute now. Improve the transparency of pricing, absolutely essential. Ensure non-discrimination between ETNL and other internet providers. Increase separation, because there were, as we know, and I'm not going into it, 2 companies, 2 sister companies, difficulty with separation. And actually, there's 4 options. One is to separate completely, which they don't go down that road. So there were issues. There were issues, and they're very clear issues. They're not minor issues. They're not just improvement. They're all about transparency and accountability and giving maximum information.
But I think part of the big problem that Analysis Mason flagged up in the report was around, as you say, transparency. But it's more about how they documented their procedures.
Well, it's more about, actually, notwithstanding the issues, it's more about how it looks as well when the report isn't published and suddenly the prices drop by, was it 50% on the day it was published?
The price was dropped, but again, I think when you look at the issue around the price drop, what they were talking about was a drop from a maximum price. And again, when you look in the detail of the report, it was only in very, very exceptional circumstances, because of competition in the market, that ENET actually used that maximum price. Now, to respond to the point that you're trying to make, we recognise that there are deficiencies. There are 13 recommendations that have been
you've
set
said
out,
that, and you're
11 implemented. But the key bit is what the Minister has referred to Cormac to look at, which is if there is an issue around the transfer of pricing arrangements between ENET and ETNL.
I think perhaps the point I'm making badly is that the arrangements in place, whether through the concession agreement, the service level agreement, should be able to capture those issues quicker, not in the manner that they've been captured.
And part of the work, that we are doing in the department is to look at whether and to what extent the governance in the department needs to be improved.
I'm just watching the clock, and I don't mean to be rude in any way at all, but I just want to ask a number of questions in relation to the improvements you can do on the chair's time. I'd love to hear them, and the chair would be delighted to give you all the time in the world, I'm sure. Just in relation to the National Broadband. No. Okay. It started out, there's a cost-benefit analysis somewhere, is there?
There's several cost benefits, so we updated it.
So have they been published?
The original CBA was published, and once.
When was it published? When was it published? Because I couldn't see it.
2015 or 16? July 2015.
December.
So obviously, with the evolution.
I understand it wasn't published now. So let's just be clear. What was published?
A redacted version of the CBA was published in July 15.
All right. Okay. So there have been many cost-benefit analyses. You've published one that's been redacted.
Yeah.
Okay. There have been other ones. Have they been published?
No.
No. Why haven't they been published?
Because they're commercially sensitive.
Commercial, lovely.
Yeah.
So the cost-benefit analysis then tells us that broadband, this is the cost and this is the benefit. And you've given the version that you've published has given all of that in terms of the cost and the quantitative analysis of the benefits. Has it given all that? Just yeah.
Analysis.
No, don't.
No. This will be very simple.
No. I'm asking, has it been published? You're saying yes. You're saying it's been redacted, some parts of it, and I'm simply asking you.
Substantially redacted.
Substantially redacted.
So
therefore, when I look at that cost-benefit analysis, I won't be able to see why broadband.
And if you let me explain why not, because it will in due course be published.
Okay.
And the reason why it's not is because since 2015, which is 4 years ago, there has, I think, been 6 versions of that, because every time the map changed, as you know, we had 757,000 initially to 540 now.
That's okay.
So you need to change it. Now, the main reason, is because there's substantial information in there with regard to costs. The cost of fibre, the cost of ducting, the cost of subcontractor prices and everything else, which are very highly sensitive to the market.
Highly sensitive, okay.
So when we do eventually publish the full details, in much fuller detail, if a government decision is made, again, the cost-benefit analysis is going through a final iteration with the Department of Expenditure Reform, and that's a concluding process. It's not finished yet, and when the government decision is made, I suppose that's the conclusion of the CBA
something
process.
Not quite right with doing a cost-benefit analysis and then it's not available. And then there are many other cost-benefit analysis, because quite clearly that's right, things change and the map reduces and somebody pulls out. But there's no cost-benefit analysis for the public to see or for us to see. So I'm going to park that for the moment. So when you did your cost-benefit analysis, was that on the basis of 800,000 premises?
Every cost-benefit analysis is based on the exact scope.
When you did your original cost-benefit analysis, what number of premises were included?
on the 757,000 that was initially identified.
So that,
through
is
the mapping.
that because I see 800, I see 540, which we'll come to,
Yeah.
but the very original one on the cost-benefit analysis was 700?
In 2015, it was 757,000 premises.
757. So subsequently, air pull out, and we're 3,000 pull out. Is that right? And we're down to 457.
Yeah.
And then you add back on 80 something
Yep.
because you find out that they're
There's
not
more premises to bring in.
So
Yeah.
the analysis originally was all wrong, wasn't it?
The analysis was based on the information that was garnered from the market at the time of where the commercial sector would go and where they wouldn't go in
But
2015.
it was wrong.
So it was absolutely correct in 2015.
Absolutely correct. And then
And then
January 16 it was wrong.
And then
No, just stay with
operators.
me now, just stay with me.
So, yeah,
It was
okay.
absolutely correct at a point, and and the next stage was wrong. Is that it?
No, what happened between our iteration and the next was
Yeah.
a board of management in AIR, for example,
Yeah.
decided in the interim period to make a commercial investment. So we reflected the updated information that occurred post our initial analysis.
That obviously affects the benefit to cost ratio, and the other things we have to layer in on the positive side is the changes in the census in 2016. So every time there was a change in a map of substance,
I understand all that.
we did the CBA,
No,
reassess the viability.
I'm not
of the
going to
project.
take Mr. Griffin's time or my own time on that. I understand that. And I'm losing my train of thought in relation to dark ducts and fibres and all sorts of things. That's what they are, dark ducts and fibres.
It doesn't get any easier for spending 24/7 doing it either, I can assure you.
No, it doesn't get any easier, but perhaps we could learn at some
Okay.
point in relation to accountability. So, of the air 300,000, and they've passed the premises, how many have been taken up? Is there an answer for that today? The 300,000 that are...
So I don't have a figure, but what I can do is quote what the chair or the CEO of AIR said.
But do you not have to monitor? Have you not an arrangement
we
with
monitor
air?
the number of premises passed.
Yes.
We get some maybe informal meeting on the connections. But what she said that 14% of the premises had been passed, but since they've looked at it, about double that have passed for the number of premises that have been
just one second now.
double have been connected for the number of premises that have been passed.
But I'm not really interested in what air are saying. They're a private provider.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we made decisions in the past. I mean, not unfortunate air, but the decisions that were made. But haven't you an arrangement with air? You're paying them money to roll out this service. They tell you that they're passing so many premises.
We monitor very closely the 300 care agreement, including the connections.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
So how many houses have taken up?
We're not in a position to share
Why
that
not,
information.
why not?
AIR have told us that it's confidential and it's commercially confidential to them.
Do you understand how it might look generally? I'm only...
What AIR have said is that it is in line with their initial projections of their business.
Well, I'm delighted to be reassured by AIR,
Yeah.
but as a member of the public accounts, I'm not reassured.
So we're very encouraged by the numbers
Lovely,
that we know.
and we'll be
Absolutely.
inspired.
Yeah, we would be very encouraged, in terms of the likely profile, of an indication of the likely profile of take-up when the NDP rolls out.
I'll come back to it, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you.